Zanaba Renge Ansamarolya Rashibe Tsumji Shuayin
I would like to wish you all an auspicious welcome. The people who asked me to give these Arya Chema were the organizing community, but the actual people whom we're giving these teachings to are primarily the nunneries, but of course, together with them, we have the Kaju Shedras also are participating. And so we have this opportunity to all enjoy the true Dharma together. Now this year and last year, because of the pandemic, it has been difficult to travel and to gather together. But because of technological tools, there's been such an advance in technological tools, even though we are separated by a great distance. It's like we can speak to each other as if we are in each other's presence. And many people have the opportunity to hear and listen. And so in the past, people from an older time, or from ancient times, who could not even dream of such an opportunity, and yet we have this opportunity. But if we think that this is easy and simple, and then don't pay attention or do not consider it important, this opportunity that we have received, I'm not saying that I'm an important person who is an important person teaching the Dharma, but the Dharma that we're teaching, the story of the liberation of a great being, such as the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorjide, and Mikyo Dorje is important for all of the students who study the Kagyu philosophy. Nice to begin with. And I hope that because of studying the liberation story of Mikyo Dorje, that you'll have a better idea than you did before of what kind of a Lama Mikyo Dorje was, what his character was, how he acted, how he taught, what his behavior was like. And so we come to know this, and when we understand the reasons for that, and then at that point we can feel real faith for him. And so in other words, if it were otherwise, we just said, thou shalt feel faith in Mikyo Dorje, we would not necessarily do that. If we say it's important, you must feel faith. But we need to think about, how does faith develop? If we think about it, it's the same in our daily life. If we're going to develop confidence in a person, we first have to know that person. We don't easily feel confidence in someone we don't know. And so for that reason, we need to know something about who Mikyo Dorje was. And then only then we can figure out how much value should we place on Mikyo Dorje, how much belief in it. I think that that's the best way. It becomes clear in our minds. And so for that reason, this teaching is different than others and is more important than others we have had in the past. And so now, as I said I said I would give a brief introduction to the birthplace of Mikyo Dorje. So I'll give a very short introduction to Mikyo Dorje's birthplace. Maybe I should say something about this actually first. Hang on a second. Please take a look at this picture. The original for this tanka is an old Engeltsen. It is kept in the Rubin Museum in America. It's an old tanka of Mikyo Dorje. Now take a look at the right side of this. Look to his right side. There is an attendant who is holding something old thing, and that is crested hat, seisha. And so I mentioned this in the past, and I shared my opinion. And at that point, when we had a meeting, and some people thought that if we use a yellow hat, then that is the same. We Kajipas wear the gomsha. Isn't it better to wear a gomsha? We should wear the meditation hat called the shata. So people did say this. But at that point, I said, the yellow hat was worn by the previous Karmapas. And there's talk about it being a Vinaya hat. So it's okay to read it. And so I kind of insisted on this. And later, there was an explanation by Kame Kenshin Rinchen Daije that I received. And when Kame Kenshin Rinchen Daije explained history, he gave a commentary from the fourth Karmapa that explained the yellow hat. And so for that reason, people realized, oh, of course, there was an old tradition of the Kajipas wearing the yellow hats. And so everyone believed and then felt comfortable wearing it. So now, this hat, I think we have a real factual evidence that Mikyo Dorje wore a yellow hat. And so this is now this is of course a new drawing, but it is taking the old one as a model. So I thought I'd explain that to you all first. Now this is Mikyo Dorje's birthplace. So this is the place where he was born. Now the name of this of Mikyo Dorje's birthday is these days is called it's in Changdu in Gazingzong. And you have to go up from Changdu City, and it's a 2-hour trip. They say. Mikyo Dorje's father was, as I said yesterday, was Serjadalo Champeshinyan, and other people say it is Ajam. So there are these two. But Mikyo Dorje himself, in most of his autobiographies, says that it's Serjadalo Champeshinyan. But Ajam was actually the father in the family. And Serjadalo Champeshinyan probably got in there somehow in the middle. I don't know exactly how. And there was probably some little difficulty that happened about that. When you read the life stories, I didn't say this the other day. The day that Mikyo Dorje was born, Ajam got a little bit into it. And so you're bringing all these dogs, all these dog puppies into the house and beat his mother. And so there's something to think about. But Ajam, he has actually acted like a father and took care of Mikyo Dorje. And so he was really the same as being a father. Now the mother was Dongso Lamadron, as I mentioned before. And so he's the granddaughter of Dong Kachama. And she was born on the 4th day of the month. So in terms of this is 1507. However, but actually, it's actually 100% that year. But in Tibetan, there are the extra months and sometimes and the change in the calendars. And for that reason, we can't 100% that it was that year, but it probably was that year. In his Dharma name, and Gyaltsab Tashi Namgyal gave him the name Chepal Sampo. And his monastic name was Pal Chuduk Drapa, and so forth. So these are the names recorded in the histories. Next, in Mikyo Dorje's birthplace, when you actually go to the place, what are the sites associated with Mikyo Dorje that you can still see? In the upper left, there is the picture of Mikyo Dorje. So this is a stupa that must have been built by his family or by his students. And in the upper right, where there's the tree, they say that this is in Tetak Posada, they planted a tree in that year, in the year of Mikyo Dorje's birth. And then the lower left, you see the root of the bark of a tree. And so this is said to be tree bark that was used to wrap his mother's body as a shroud after she passed away. And so it says they took they hollowed out a tree and put her inside of it, but now they hollowed out the tree and put her body inside of it, and so her body decomposed, but the bark still remains. Now the upper left there, with the manis, with the upper, with the carved stones. There was a house or a stupa that was built in his mother's memory, but nowadays it is just rules. It's just the rules of of that house, they say. And on the upper left there, the great footprint, right? This is, they say, is a footprint of Mikyo Dorje that is in someone's home. And below, where there are many rocks, right? In the middle, there are some footprints. And these are footprints from when Mikyo Dorje was a child. In any case, even to this day, in that region is an area where they follow the Karma Kagyu and where they uphold the Karma Kagyu tradition. So next, now that I've talked about his life story a little bit, I would like to talk about the second of the stanza of the praise. He searched thoroughly. Now, according to the annotations by the fifth Shamar Kuncha Yenlak, the meaning of the stanza, or the topic of the stanza, is how he entered the teachings himself and also brought others into them. excuse me, it's a little bit different. It's how he gave up the impedance to the teachments and began engaging in benefiting others. The text says, seeing that those who try to make pseudo-dharma of the disobedient and naturally unwholesome into true dharma remain outside like a husk. He taught the fine meaning well, to him I pray. To explain in brief what this means, when we are practicing the dharma, it's really important for us to know what is the dividing line between dharma and non-dharma. And in order to recognize this, we need to ascertain in our minds what the dharmas, the scriptures, the sutras and tantras teach should be discarded, and what are the ones to be taken up. And we need to understand this meaning. So understanding the meaning, and we need to realize the meaning. And this should not be left as something that we just understand or have heard. We need to put it to practice. If we are able to put it into practice, we can be counted as a pure Dharma practitioner. Now, whether we've put it into practice or not is not just having an understanding in your mind, or just knowing or understanding the meaning. What it primarily depends on whether you have strong longing and determination. You have to have strong longing, and you have to have definite determination and fervent determination. For example, if we want to enter the path or have the path of the listeners and Pratyeka Buddhas take root in our being, we absolutely have to have the intention of wishing to achieve nirvana, liberation from the prison of samsara. But what we make the most important in this lifetime is getting the fame and goods and respect in this lifetime. We make that the main thing that we try to achieve, and what we practice to gain. And so it's difficult for us to even get away into the ranks of the listeners and Pratyeka Buddhas. Now, for the path of the Mahayana path to take root in our being, we should only think of benefiting others and have no thought of our own self-interest at all. Or at the very least, we should consider that others are more important than ourselves. But when you look at our current situation, when something unfortunately happens, when something unfortunate happens to the people we don't like, and for a few hours we feel like joy deep inside ourselves. It's also difficult for us to say that we've entered the ranks of the Mahayana. And when we were doing tantric practice, we should meditate on the entire world as a pure realm and all the beings who inhabit it in the form of perception. But for us, everything that appears to us arises as an adversary. And everyone we see is like appears to us as like as an enemy. At the very least, so that everything, actually, in the very least, everything that appears to us is something that we don't like, and whoever we see, we kind of get annoyed at them. And so it's difficult for us to become tantric practitioners who practice the secret mantra Vajrayana. And so in brief, we don't know the crucial points of what to do and what to give up. So we confuse the practices of the three types of vows and Buddha taught that we should discard the disobedient and naturally unwholesome acts, but instead we put them into practice. We do them. And so even though we are not actually Dharma practitioners, we look on the outside as if we are practitioners. And we act in various ways as if we were. But Mikyo Dorje said that this is pointless, and this is like the bark on the outside, or the husk on the outside of something that needs to be discarded. It is something externally discarded. It is not something to keep. He knew this. He realized this. And he also taught that unmistaken path, or the unmistaken meaning to others. And so for that reason, to him who taught the unerring meaning and fine path, to Mikyo Dorji, I pray. So when we recite this prayer, the praise he searched thoroughly, we shouldn't then think that these points are merely praises of Mikyo Dorje or descriptions of his greatness. We shouldn't think of it like that. Instead, there is, Tsongkhapa wrote in his summary of the stage of the path, I, a yogi, practice like that. You who want liberation, do the same. And later they changed it a little bit and said, the Jetsun Gurus practice like that. You who want liberation, do the same. So they shifted the words, changed the words a little bit. But in the collected works of Tsongkhapa in his minor works, it says, I, a yogi, practice like that. So that's the actual quote from Tsongkhapa. In any case, it's just the same. Just as the Jetsun Gurus, the venerable gurus, practice like that, you have to practice. The practice such as they did it is something that we need to follow. And we need to work to make that happen. And this is extremely important. And so when you read these prayers, such as the praise he searched thoroughly, we shouldn't say, oh, I'm praying, please protect me. And burden the Lama with all of our hopes and instead we need to think about ourselves, to think as we recite the prayers. Now the meaning of this actually is, I think, similar to the meaning of the second good deed that we discussed yesterday, so I don't need to go into depth. So now I'd like to think about the third good deed from the autobiographical verses good deeds. So this is the third good deed. And this third good deed there is the commentary by Sangye Paldrup called The Bright Lamp. And according to its outline, this is called The Favorable Condition, Following Great Spiritual Friends. The first reads, when I saw that the Mahayana masters were unmistaken and became captivated by their excellent qualities and acted in harmony with all of their august examples. The great beings therefore granted me their blessings with delight. I think of this as one of my good deeds. So now what this teaches is how Mikyo Dorji himself, how he pleased them in ways in harmony with the true Dharma. Now there is a text called The Past Deeds of Mikyo Dorji that he wrote himself. And within that, you see, it describes how he met his spiritual friends and made a connection of conviction and purification, as he phrased it. And when he wrote this, he writes, I met the great being, the Nyewogo Sri Tulku Tashi Namgyal, an emanation of Milarepa's disciple Shiva O, and of the Bodhisattva Paljadandra. He gave me the Mahayana fasting vows and empowerments, blessings, and pith instructions, including the Bhagavan Gyawajatso, Vajravarahi, Mahakala Bernakchen. I esteemed him highly with unbreakable respect and made him the object for gathering merit and confessing misdeeds. So if you the first guru in Mikyo Dorji's lifetime, it was the second Gyaltsab Rinpoche, Tashi Namgyal. So how is the Gyaltsab Tulku Tashi Namgyal, or the second Gyaltsab Rinpoche, if you ask him, please, how could you give him an introduction to his life? So I will describe it in brief. The second Gyaltsab Rinpoche was born in central Tibet in a valley called Nyemo. And the year he was born in was in the fire-shaped year of the 8th cycle. This is probably 1487. the seventh Karmapa Chura Gyatso recognized him as the reincarnation of Gochuri Padra Dundrop. In the water pig year in 1503, as Guru Rinpoche had prophesied, Chura Gyatso gave him a red crown with a golden blaze that had been accomplished and blessed as the essence of speech of Vajra Abhitaba, Lama Gondir practice. And so that is when the practice of Shamara, of him wearing the orange-colored crown. So now, in terms of his accomplishment in the Dharma, was actually really great. So if you needed to receive an empowerment from Gyaltsen Rinpoche, then you would go to receive them from Oshri Tulku and Drung Sitaba and his brother, and from Drumbo Goshu. There was also a tradition of receiving instructions in monastic ordination from the tradition of Jay Kyase. So he had received many transmissions and empowerments. And so, for example, when we read the list of Karma Trinapa's transmissions received, he said most of the oral transmissions were from them. And so most of the impairments, pith instructions, and transmissions were from Goshu Gyatso, and these others. And so his activity in this way was similar to the activity of Goshu Padra Dundrop, who was really had really listened to many. Goshu Padra Dundrop had received pretty much all of the empowerments, transitions, and lungs for all of the different lineages available in Tibet. And so the second Gyaltsab also had a similar activity. So after the seventh Karmapa Chura Gyaltsab passed away, Goshri Tashi Namgyal was the regent of these, and so he was given the title of Gyaltsab Tulku, so the regent Tulku. That's from that time. So now we say Gyaltsab. So Goshri was the name given during the first time. Padra Dundrop was given the title of Genin Goshi. So there are different levels of Goshi. So there's a Goshi, there's Great Goshi, Panding Goshi, Kwanding, so the empowered is the empowered. So this Goshi is it's Italian, excuse me, it's Chinese, but when you say it with a it's in Tibetan, it's many people think that it's kind of similar to
Goshi
Guo means means a teacher, so it makes the teacher for the country. And so Gyaltsab Rinpoche went to Chang and benefited many essentials in many ways, and then he returned to Gompa Tselakang and built representations of body, speech, and mind. And particularly, he built a golden reliquary study for the remains of the seventh Karmapa. Then he recognized and enthroned the eighth Karmapa, and in the end passed away. In the wood pig year of 1515, he was only 29 years old, but he passed away. So as I said before, the conditions or the circumstances of his passing away, and so I spoke about that yesterday. So I'm not going to talk about such unfortunate circumstances. So if we only commiserate every day, doesn't work. So that is now we'll say that this is a short account of Gyaltsab Rinpoche's life. So next is the question of when did Mikyo Dorje meet Gyaltsab Rinpoche? How did he meet him? And what Dharma connection did they have? So in the year of the bird, so this is 1513 probably. So on the first day of the first lunar month of that year, Mikyo Dorje, so this time he was called the Eastern Tulku, before it had become to that. And when he first came to the encampment, And on the day that he came, before the sun set on that day, he came to Gyaltsab Rinpoche and they met for the first time. Then on the 11th day of the second lunar month, the Eastern Tulku, or Mikyo Dorje himself, was enthroned on the Karmapa as the Karmapa. Now, so at that point, one thing I need to say is that Mikyo Dorje had been predicted by many Turtans, and so because many Turtans had given the prophecies, and some of the prophecies it says, some say that there was only 7 Karmapas who'd appear, and even though there was that prediction, it's often said the first 7 Karmapas are true Karmapas, but the following that they are, and the reason is because they weren't prophesied by Guru Rinpoche. So they say that's what they say, but that's because they only saw one prophecy. But in other prophecies, it said that he would be 7 burns and 13 emanations. So there's also that prediction. So for that, the first of these 13 emanations would be Mikyo Dorje, and the name Mikyo Dorje itself is indicated in Mikyo Dorje's prophecies. So I'll speak about these prophecies later if I have some time. But at this point, I don't need to talk about a lot of prophecies. So at that time, when the Eastern Tulku was put on the throne. Now, I mentioned this. Yes, I didn't describe this yesterday clearly the other day, so I'll talk about it yesterday. So after the Eastern Tulku was put on the throne, the father of the Western Tulku, Amdo Lama, he had given all the wrong views to the had instilled wrong views in leaders and followers of the encampment, and he said. And so things didn't work out as he'd said. And he made them, and he said, I'm not going to stay in the encampment. I'm going back to Drangsong and Kompo. And when he said that, Gyaltsab Rinpoche said, it's better for you to stay in the encampment. And your son is not the Karmapa. But I can make sure that he is given the same importance and respect as I am. And the leaders of the encampment also discouraged him, but he didn't listen. And so he went back to Kompo, Draksum and Kompo. And as they're going down, the father and son, I'm not sure how, and I don't know what the reasons, but someone else captured them. And when they were captured, and they lost their freedom, and all the monks who were in the retinue all just scattered, and they had no food or any resources, and they ended up in a very difficult situation, as the history is described. Then on the year of the bird, on the 1513, on the third day, the fourth lunar month, Mikyo Dorje took the Mahayana fasting vows from Gyaltsab Rinpoche. And was given the name Chukyap Tapapal Sampo. And then gradually, he was given the empowerments of Hayagriva and Varahi. So that began at that point. And then on the third day of the 8th lunar month of the same year, at Wulung Retreat, a monastery, there's a place called Wulung, and there is a monastery there, and that is where Gyaltsab gave him the vows going forth. So he discarded the signs of a layperson and took on the signs and robes of a monastic. So in brief, Mikyo Dorje considered Gyaltsab extremely kind to him. Not only that, he also treated Gyaltsab Rinpoche's reincarnation very respectively. A Feast for Scholars by Paul Rinpoche says, he thought of Shamar Kunchi Yenlag, the Nirmanakaya of the fourth holder of the Shamarkan, and Drapapelja, the Tulku of Jesser Rinpoche, as his actual
나라
lamas. He did not think of them otherwise as his students. So he considered the reincarnation of the fourth Shamar Chenga Chuda, that is the fifth Shamar Chikunchi Inlak, and Drapapelja, the Tulku of Rinpoche, as his actual lamas. That is the next one. So, and he also describes this very clearly in his autobiography, as it says in the autobiography. After that, I approached the Nirmanakaya of the Lord himself, great Avaduti Papadrakapalja. Though I did not actually make offerings of body and speech, mentally I took him as worthy of prostrations and respect, and did as much accumulation and purification as I could, as fit with my mind. And so basically, the third Gyatso Drapakundra was the third Gyatso Rinpoche. So he did not actually physically prostrate or make offerings for him because he was a younger guru, and was someone that Mikyo Dorje had recognized. So if Mikyo Dorje had prostrated, it wouldn't have looked good. But in his mind, he had incredibly great respect, as he says. And so this is speaking about a brief amount about the first guru of Gyatso Rinpoche, Gyatso Rinpoche, Mikyo Dorje's first lama, and how he followed him. And then the second, or you could say the most important guru, who is that? It was Sanjin Nyempa Druptop. So Sanjin Nyempa Druptop. So what was he? How did he first meet him? How did he follow him? So I'd like to give an explanation, but first we will take a break, and then when we come back, we will begin immediately with this. So now I'll continue with the teaching.
Sanjin Nyempa
Rinpoche. There have been 10 Sanjin Rinpoches, have there? So the first Sanjin Rinpoche was called Sanjin Nyempa Druptop, or the one called Dema Druptop, the Dema Mahasiddha. So from the time he was 10, Mikyo Dorje followed Dema Druptop, or Sanjin Nyempa, as his guru. So, of all the gurus that Mikyo Dorje followed in his life, the most important, and the one for whom he had the greatest faith, was Sanjin Nyempa Rinpoche. Likewise, when we talk about the unified lineage, or the actual lineage of the Kagyu lineage, Sanjin Rinpoche is the only one listed as the guru of Mikyo Dorje. So Sanjin Rinpoche, or Sanjin Nyempa, or Dema Druptop, it's important for us to know who he was and to know a bit about his story. So I thought I'd introduce that. The place he was born is called Denma, the valley of Denma in Kham. His family was he was a descendant of the Lord of Denma, and the year that he was born was the Woodocks year of the 1440s, but it's difficult to say what year in the 15th century. There are many discrepancies. So he was born in the 15th century, the 1400s, and so for the time that he was little, just merely hearing the name of Karmapa, he got goosebumps and he shed tears, and he had such a great desire to meet the Karmapa that he couldn't eat in the daytime and he couldn't sleep at night. And so he had such a great desire to meet the Karmapa. And so for that reason, when he was 6 years old, his father brought him to the seventh Karmapa, to have an audience with the seventh Karmapa. And as soon as he met Chodajasa, it was just like a father and son meet each other. And they had a feeling for each other that was unlike any other. And they felt really close to each other. And so at that time, the seventh Karmapa Chodajasa gave him the name Tashi Paljora. Now, when he reached the age of age, in the presence of Pengar Chambo Sambo and Pajadundrup, he went forth as a monk. And from the age of 9 until he was 16, while he was in the region of Denma, he studied the 5 Dharmas of Maitreya, Nagarjuna's collection of logic, and others teachings of Sutra and Tantra. And once he had read the philosophy to a certain degree, he thought that solely studying wouldn't help him. That he also needed to practice, and to do that, in order to do that, he needed to follow a good guru and receive the profound pith instructions. And so he left and went alone to go to see Chodajasa. And at that time, the place where he stayed was and where Chodajasa was, between them is a place that was probably 2 hours journey. But he went without stopping day and night and arrived and met saw Chodajasa at the age of 19, and then for the next 7 years, and he followed Chodajasa and Pengar Gyatso and Jasa Tamajatanis, and he was with them inseparably for 7 years. And he went through really severe austerities and worked very hard. And for that reason, very, very. And he subsisted on food scraps, and because of that, everyone called him Nyempa Nyochok or Ngarlbu Nyempa. The reason for that is because his family was the clan was a Nyen, and his body had become a bit bluish, and so they called him Ngarlbu Nyempa or Nyempa Nyochok. And so that was the name, the nickname that he was given. Now, when he was about 23 years old, he had received good instruction. So now he needed to devote himself one-pointedly to practice. So thinking in this way, he went to the seventh Karmapa and said, I should do this. So it'd be okay? And the Karmapa said, you should do exactly that. And when you go to, first begin in the areas of calm, and then go to the central Tibet and practice there. And then I'll eventually come to central Tibet. And so, because of this, Nyempa Drupta went down to Kampo Nenang, and he spent 3 years practicing there. Then he went to Pangpu, and he spent 2 years practicing there. Then he went to Central Tibet and spent 2 years practicing at Surpu. And then he went to Nyenchen Tangla and spent 1 year in retreat there. It was probably 12 years. And during this time, he didn't start a fire. He didn't eat any cooked food. He lived only on, it's 8 years, not 12. And he lived on chulen, or extracting the ashes, for 8 years. So he didn't make any food. He didn't eat any hot food. And he only did the chulen, or extracting the essence practice, and subsisted only on that. Then he went to the encampment, and when he was in the encampment, even then, the encampments, whoever they were, they all had an allowance, but he didn't take his allowance at all. He took the scraps from leftover scraps from tormas and the leftover tea leaves from making tea, and he would boil those and eat that. And he wouldn't eat any of the provisions he was given. And also, he wouldn't speak to anyone other than his gurus, and he practiced silence. And the seventh Karmapa Tradition sent Sechadal and Gedunjatsim as his partner. The two went off, and they both lived in Chulan. They went to Skylek or Namso in northern Tibet, a very famous place, right? And they spent 5 years practicing there. And then they went to Mun Domsang. So Mun these days is part of it is over in the area controlled by China. Part of it is in the area controlled by India. But basically, but the Mun Domsan is probably in the area controlled by China. And so he went there, and he also went to Drolung, Sangpup, and Yalashampo. And he spent a year in each of these places practicing. Now, when he reached the age of 4, he thought to himself, I've gone to many of the important sacred sites in Tibet. I think maybe I should go to India and go to to Udayana in the west. So Udayana these days is now probably in the area of current-day Pakistan. The birthplace of Padmasambhava is there. And so he thought he should go. But he wasn't sure if his friend would go or not. So he wanted to test his friend's mettle. And he said to him, I want to go to Shambhala in the north. He said, are you going to come along with me? He said. The friend said, and Sechadala said, he was kind of surprised. Don't joke around. How could we go to places that Menlong Guru and Drupten Orjinpa couldn't get to? Instead, if you have enough confidence, let's see if we can get to Udayana in the west. I think that would be better, he said. So he got what he wanted, right? And so when he got what he wanted, and my friend is going to come. So they started to get ready to go to Udayana. They'd made all their preparations when his friend and Dharma friend Sechadala suddenly passed away. And when he passed away, then because that condition, it was like because that circumstance, then Rinpoche thought about it. I said, my guru is a Buddha. Is there any Western Udayana country or some Vajravari or Sattva who could be better than the Guru Buddha? Because it's often said that Vajravari lives in Udayana, right? So when Urjinpa went to that, Vajravara had taken the form of a prostitute and was something that he met her. And so there's talk about this. So it's sometimes said that if you went to the great practitioners would say that if you went to Udayana, if you go to there, if you go there, you'd meet Vajravari. But if we went to these places, we wouldn't meet Vajravari. We'd see these, bearded, these bearded Muslim people would probably take care of us. So I think we should pray to it from afar. But I think if we were to actually go there now, we'd be in danger. And so when he passed away, the friend passed away, and so what am I going to do? So my friend, and he said he was going to go, but he passed away, and I've lost him. And so now the Karmapa knows all joys and woes, and thinking this, and he put a hold on going off to Udayana. He had a dream where someone came to him and said to him, "You haven't gone to see your main mother." That means, the mother who gave birth to him. Aren't you going to go to see her and make a Dharma connection with her? So he had this vision. And so because of that, he had a great desire to see his mother. He asked the seventh Karmapa. And Chudajasa was also very pleased and said, "Oh yeah, you should do exactly that." And so he went back to his homeland. And when we went back going back, when he thought about it, he realized his mother had passed away. And not only that, she had been been reborn as a Dakini who had arisen from Matra. And he understood this. And he also had a vision. And this Dakini, said, I'm living in a terrestrial state, and I want to go to be dwelling in the skies. And in order to do that, you must give me the Chakrasamvara empowerment. So please give me that empowerment. So he had that vision. And so through his samadhi, he visualized this and gave her the empowerment through the samadhi. Now, at that time, on his homeland, there was a big war, actually. There was Demo and Adra. They got in a fight. Now, when they got when the conflict started, then one of Sanjay Emperor's brothers was killed by the people from Amtra. And when they killed him, not only that, they said that they heard that there was this yogi brother named Sanjay Nyempa of the deceased, and he was coming back. And they heard this from central Tibet. And so they immediately sent someone to kill Sanjay Nyempa. They sent a few people to kill Sanjay Nyempa. When they saw Sanjay Nyempa, when they looked for where Sanjay Nyempa was, and in the end, they came to some cave. Nyempa Rinpoche, so beneath him, he had put just a little bit of dry grass, and he was sitting on that. He was extremely thin. His robe were just like a really incredibly thin, rip. They saw immediately their hatred subsided, and they felt they uncontrollably felt faith. I think that someone doing this practice, their hatred died down, and they felt faith. And once they felt faith, both the people from both Atra and Denma both come in place. Please help us resolve our conflict. But at that time, he didn't want to. He didn't like engaging in such worldly activities, and so he wished to continue staying in solitude. But at that time, the Lord Chudajasa sent him a letter in which said, "You need to build a monastery and need to benefit beings." And so this letter came, and when the letter arrived, he thought to himself, "I don't have the qualities to build a monastery and benefit sentient beings." But he's giving me this order. Maybe he's trying to test me to see what is the level of my experience in Dharma practice. And so when he sent back a message saying, "I'm not able to do that," and then once again, a letter came. And so you must do it. And when he said, and then when he said, "Well, the Guru's command is there's no better way to achieve supreme siddhi than by following the Guru's commands," and so he went back to his homeland, and he resolved the feud between Atra and Denma. And then when he was 43 years old, at Ujjara mountain retreat, he built a new monastery. And he taught that even the people who had killed his brother Mahamudra and other things, and gave them many horses and other material things, and so they thought to him so that he is really impartial and unbiased, and they developed great faith in him. And not only he didn't only build built the monastery, and he taught many instructions, and many people gained accomplishment from that. Now, because of this, his activity flourished, and all of the earlier pre-existing monasteries in the region of Denmark became very envious of him. As they think, oh, all the people in Denmark are going to be Kanjipas, and so they carried weapons, and they came, and they went to go to see Dhamma, and all the people of the region said, please don't do that, and they stopped them. And they were able to basically just barely stop them, but at that time, the dispute still continued. And so for that reason, Sangye Nyempa, most of the monks in Sangye Nyempa's monastery, they spent their time in mountain retreats. They didn't spend time in mountains. So not long afterwards, a big earthquake happened. And all of the monasteries and all the buildings of the monasteries where they didn't like them before collapsed. And the mountain retreat where Sangye Nyempa himself also was destroyed. And he had two nephews at that time. And there were two good Nyempas, and they also both passed away. But at that time, the entire building happened. It was a 3 or 4 story house, and that had completely collapsed. But the walls were standing up like that. They were remaining like that. Sangye Nyempa Sangye Nyempa was on the top of one of these walls. When people saw this, he must have flown in the sky. He's a Mahasiddha. And so from that time, he was given the name of Nyempa Druptop or Nyempa Mahasiddha. I don't know whether they actually flew in the sky, but it's a great. The entire building collapsed, but he was left on the wall. So they said he's a siddhi, they said. And so that's how he got the name Nyempa Druptop. And so the monastery building had been destroyed in the equivalent, and he moved to a new location and down to the base of the mountain and made a new monastery called Janchuk Ling. Then also at that time, he also went to the places of the other monasteries where there had been the dispute, and he went and later. All of the monasteries in the region of Denmark all became very harmonious and got along very well. And then Chaturyasa then sent him another message and said, "Don't stay there. Now go to the spread the Dharma up in Dokkan." And so he went to go and collect donations. Basically, he said. So he went to many different places, and in some places, if there were monasteries in disrepair, he restored them, and he encouraged people to practice virtue, and he made offerings to Chaturyasa, like the 100,000 offerings, or 10,000 offerings, or 1,000 offerings. In particular, he became Mikyo Dorje's guru, and offered all the empowerment spith instructions and advice that he had to Mikyo Dorje. And then in the end, when he was 65, he said, no different if I pass away. I've done everything that I need to do. I've completed all my intentions. And so he passed away at Karma Monastery. So generally, he had many different students. But actually, in terms of his practice and the fame, if we'd like to name his fame, he should have had a lot of students, but he made the aspiration, may all of the students of my students become students of Mikyo Dorje's, and so for that reason, Sangye Nyempa himself, there weren't many people who were then considered Sangye Nyempa students. So that is a brief life of Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche. So how did Mikyo Dorje follow Sangye Nyempa as his guru? So Karmapa Mikyo Dorje before he was recognized as the Karmapa when he was 4 years old, the sister of Choda Gyatso, named Womogawa, came to who is here? Came to him and she said to him, "Who is here, brother?" And he said, "Oh, my guru is Demadrupta." And so from that time, in his lifetime, among all of the gurus he had in his life, the one he considered the most important and most sacred was Sanjay Rinpoche. When he first met Sanjay, was when Mikyo Dorje was 9 years old. Now at that time, Sanjay Rinpoche and Drumla Tashi Wezer came to the encampment to meet Mikyo Dorje. So at that time, he first met Sanjay Rinpoche. So Drumla Tashi Wezer, I'll speak about him in the next few days. I don't need to describe him now. At that point, as soon as he met the two gurus, Mikyo Dorje felt faith or strong longing for them. And then thinking, oh, it would be great if I could follow gurus such as these. And he made that sort of aspirations and prayers. And so when he prayed at the time, it's like this. At that point, he just made the aspirations, but he didn't have the opportunity to follow as a guru at that point, because at that point, the people in the encampment were very strict. Then Mikyo Dorje didn't have much power, and he didn't have the freedom for things to work out as he wished. Now, generally, Mikyo Dorje is the one who was most appropriately to be the guru of Mikyo Dorje was the fourth Shama Chugi Drakpa. But at that time, Mikyo Dorje was in Kham. Shama Rinpoche was in central Tibet. So for one thing, they're very far from each other. And yesterday, in addition to that, the people in the encampment, as I mentioned yesterday, Shama Rinpoche in a bad light, and for these reasons, the Shama Rinpoche, he was unable to meet Shama Rinpoche. But Shama Rinpoche sent a letter or a message, and said that among all of the lamas in the encampment or in Kham and in that area, the one who is most worthy to be the precious Tulku's teacher is Gyatso Rinpoche, but he's passed away. There are many others students of the seventh Karmapa who have realization, but they've mostly passed away. So the one who's most worthy is the Demadrupta. And so he wrote this and sent it to him. Likewise, there's a testament of Choda Gyatso written down that said, tutor for the recommission, so that gives a list of who would be appropriate. And so there are many names, including Gyatso Tokten and many others. But among them, he wrote in writing that Sanjay Nyempo would be the best person, most worthy to be his teaching. And so for that reason, Sanjay Nyempo was invited to the encampment to be his guru. So now if you're asking, how long did Mikyo Dorje follow him as a student? And so Mikyo Dorje, it wasn't a very long time. So when Mikyo Dorje was 10 years, and when Mikyo Dorje was 10 until the time that to the second year of, there was only until the year of the hare and the second month. So it's basically it says 4 years, but actually if you look at it, it's actually only 2 full years. It's actually a very short period of time. If you think about complete years, it's actually only 2 years, and so that was the period of time when he followed Sanjay Nyempo Rinpoche as his guru. But when we think about that, how is it that you can have this? How can you get all these? There's not enough time to get all the empowerments and transitions. If we think about it today, first you need in the morning, you have to do time to drink breakfast. You need a lunch time for lunch in the minute, time to eat at noon time. After you eat, you have to take a nap. In India, then 3 or 4 years older, then you have to have a tea time in the afternoon. Then at 50, 60, you have to have a dinner. Yeah, so much of these. If you look at it, yeah, that it takes so much time. If we look at it from our side, when we think about it, how can you think in moderns we think about how can you get so many empowerments and transmissions in just such a short time as 2 years? But when we look at the actual life stories, there's a short period of time, but the way that he followed his guru, he didn't waste any time at all. And the way that, and how we know that is when Mikyo Dorje, when he was following Mikyo Dorje, as soon as the sun rose, before and until in the evening it set, he spent the entire day with Sangyur Rinpoche. He ate. He didn't go elsewhere to have his lunch. He ate it right there with Nyempa Rinpoche. So what Dharma did he listen to then? So Mikyo Dorje wrote in his own autobiography, "Then I touched the feet of Sangyur Nyempa Mahasiddha, the Nirmanakaya of Joas Mirijana, and took the novice vows. He gave me the empowerments and blessings of the Kriya Tantra, including the Trisamaya Vyuha, empowerments of the blessing of the Charya Tantra, including Vajrapani, empowerments and blessings of the Yoga Tantra, including Vadadeshattvara, empowerments of blessings of the unexcelled Yoga Tantra, including Kala Chakra, and in particular, the blessings of the ninth dhyana, such as the strength of awareness and breathe. He gave me all the empowerments of the empowerments, transitions. In particular, I received many instructions of what I know as the 9 profound cycles of instructions of the Sakai, Dosha, Dakpo, Shangpa, Dzogchen, and so forth. I held them to be our highest object for accumulation and purification. Day and night, whenever I remembered, I took the empowerments through the Vajrayana, never missing a day. And so basically, he received all of the teachings of the ancient and the new traditions, and he listened to a great deal of Dharma. And when he listened to all of them, from that time, during that time, he said that that it's really difficult to be such a guru as Sangyur Rinpoche, and for that reason, when he was with Khenpo, he never let him had any expressions of afflictions or disrespect or kindness. He never thought of himself as being equal or as being an ordinary individual, thinking that they're the same. He never even let himself have such a thought. Even when he went down to go to bed at night, get in the evening, he would think about what his guru had done, what teachings he had done, how he had been, and he only thought about that, and he fell asleep thinking about it. In the morning, when he went to see his teacher, they would first offer the mandala and the 7-branch prayer. He would visualize the Drupchen of this guru as Vajrasattva, recite the 100 sublets. Then they would take the 4 empowerments in terms of the way through Chakra Samvara and Vajrayana, and they take this metta. And then ask like this, it's not like they just go and sit down and the beginning say Om. It wasn't like he didn't do it like we take Dharma teachings these days. And during the teaching, or when eating the food, when having different questions, Mikyo Dorje would try to make sure that he was never separate from, never apart from bodhicitta. And he was really assiduous about that in his mind. And thinking, may I be able to bring benefit to protectorless and defenseless sentient beings. And you think, how can I help the sentient beings? What can I do to benefit the teachings? And he thought about this over and over again. So when he was listening, he worked assiduously to retain the words. When he was contemplating, he ascertained the meaning. And he worked hard to develop experience when meditating. So in brief, when he was taking teachings from Sanjay Rinpoche, he had a really strong interest and longing for it. And so from the early morning when he got up, it's like he went really early, he would appear at
But
the Lama's tent really early in the morning. So what time is it? So he didn't have talks, they didn't watch it. They said, right now it's probably time, it's probably okay to go. And it's like he's unable to wait. And after the teachings were done in the evening, when he went back to his own quarters, what do you think to himself? Young, because I'm so young, because of that, I can't be his attendant. But if I were, then I would be able to be his attendant. And I'd still continue to stay with the Guru. And it's like his eyes were filled with tears, like he couldn't bear to be apart. It's not like nowadays where the teaching's done. Okay, you get up and it's okay, it's fine. Okay, now we have some time off. Oh, so now we can go enjoy ourselves. We didn't think about it like that. And even when he went to bed, he would put his head face in the direction wherever the Guru was. He wouldn't lie down like a dog or a pig. And in the day when he was staying with the Shanta, the attendant, Sanjay Rinpoche's attendants they were so used to him that they just kind of started ignoring him and didn't really pay attention to him. So at that time, Mikyo Dorje was young, so he's like 11. So at that time, so he would do whatever he could to give his Guru his robes, give him his books, help him bathe. When Mimir Rinpoche had a problem with his foot, and so when he first met, at the beginning, he was able to walk when he first met Mikyo Dorje, but later he was unable to walk, and so he helped him he nursed him through this illness and so forth. So basically, even though Mikyo Dorje was lung, he served his Guru and did whatever he could. So the way that he follows it, the way he please me, Sanjay Nipan, what he said was, so Karmapa, you are of course it's a Brahmin Monica. Just like pretending to do it. And so just hearing my Dharma is just enough. No, Karmapa, your actions and are really in accord with the Dharma, and the Dharma that I have given have been descended from the Dharma is passed down from the great Kagyu Fourfold. So I think this will bring great benefit to sentient beings. So just continue to behave and perform the actions and examples as you are doing now, and if you do so, it'll bring benefit to sentient beings. And so because an authentic Guru had been pleased, because of that, then he received all the blessings of body, speech, and mind were transferred from in their entirety from one to the next. This is a particular feature of Mahapandita Naropa's tradition. So if Mahapandita Naropa, he was like a great Pandita. He was the most well-known Pandita in Vikramashila. But he didn't think about he was not satisfied with the fame that came from being a Pandita. And he went to some beggar, penniless beggar in Tilopa, and he took revenge. Also with Marpa the translator disregarded the danger to his life and served Mahapandita Naropa. Milarepa was also the same. No matter how badly Marpa treated, and everyone thought that Marpa had gone crazy. And probably thought he was going to kill this person. But Milarepa never had any thought. He never had a wrong views about it, and because of that, so Milarepa became the most famous yogi in Tibet. And so, for this reason, if you actually see the Guru seeing the Guru as an actual Buddha is a profound, secret, crucial point of devotion. And for the blessing of the previous Kaji medicine, we're able to also develop in we're also to be able to take root in Mikyo Dorje's being. So in brief, because of following Sanji Nyempa as his guru, he was able to develop confidence in Dharma, faith in the Guru, and disgust for samsara. And he was able to consider others more important than himself. And he said this all happened because of Sanji Nyempa Drupta. And Mikyo Dorje wrote this in his own autobiography. And what it says is, the mind stream of someone like myself is not workable. And I spend a lot of time with wrong views about Dharma individuals. I don't see any qualities. But with the diligence, and so what he's saying here, someone like me, I have a really wild character and really fixed views. And no matter what sort of guru, whatever person I'm saying, I always feel like I have to scrutinize them. I think what he's doing is not. I'm that sort of a person. And I don't really ever see commenters, but I see that sort of person. But now, I said, with the diligence and progeny of seeing if I could analyze the scriptures and with understanding that this life has an emitting, I had a bit of renunciation of wishing to be in an isolated place. And getting a bit of understanding the beings of my parents is solely due to the power of compassion of my guru, the great Jetsun. And so his ability to use his intelligence to abandon, to examine the teachings of the scriptures, and to be diligent about this. And he has a little bit of a renunciation of wanting to practice in isolated places. And he had some sort of conceptual understanding of sentient beings as parents. And he said that this happened only because of the kindness of the great guru. When I look at his ability to tame people with mistaken minds, such as myself, I cannot describe how much appears to be only in the spheres of those with great fortune. For that reason, these days, most people do not recognize qualities and put their hopes in the false qualities. And so, what he's saying here, for someone like myself, I'm someone who always has wrong ways of thinking. I'm such a horrible person, but because if I'm able to receive the so if someone such as myself can receive his blessing, then if someone has of good fortune, of course they can do that. We can't understand this, but these days most people don't. That people who have qualities, and they put their faith in those who don't have qualities but pretend to do, and they go for refuge to them. But with this great guru, but even though you don't need, doesn't pretend that he doesn't have that he has qualities when he doesn't, and he doesn't worry about the qualities in it. But that is basically his character as it is qualities. He doesn't need to boast to anyone about it. And so for the entire lifetime, this is a guru who's been consistent through his entire lifetime. What he said is, from the time he was 7 until he died, he did not have any alcohol. From the time he was 12, he didn't eat any meat. From the 22 until I could attend him at the age of 62, he wore only tattered clothes and ate food scraps, and he had a tattered mat. And so what this is saying is that Nyingyen Rinpoche, from the time he was 7 until he passed away, he didn't have any alcohol at all. For 12 years, he did not eat any meat. So when talking about eating meat, it was very difficult in Tibet at that time. And these days in Tibet, it's something that people often have pointless fun about it. And I think if you're a Tulku, people every day, they say that every day you have to eat. So one said that every day you should eat meat, and some people don't eat meat. Even if you can't. And There are people who say even if you're not able to give up, that at least say people that you should have to. I think and many people say that if you say that you should eat meat, if you eat, that it's like the Mara Devadatta. And so during Mikado times, he really prohibited eating meat. And I'll speak about that later. But at that point, from the time Sandhi Nempa was 22, until he met Mikyo Dorje for the 62 years old, he wore a single tattered shamtop, tattered clothes, and it fastened. He only wore these tattered rags. And until he was 24, his only possession was a single marabelon fruit. He didn't have anything else. And not just him. And he would, and the people around him, and even the dogs, didn't eat any meat at all where there was any doubt, where they had seen or heard or had doubt that it might have been slaughtered for them. And so for that, Mikyo Dorje himself, in his entire life, I saw that Nyempa Rinpoche had spent his only lifetime doing activities that he had spent his own life doing dharmic activities, and gave us a good example for us. So if we think about from Mikyo Dorje, we think that Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche had a very strong influence on him. Mikyo Dorje is like someone with a great power of wisdom, love, and power. And for this to occur, the main reason is Mikyo Dorje's own efforts and his intelligence. And this became because of the power of that. But if there's no condition of the no favorable condition of the spiritual friend, this wouldn't happen. And among his many spiritual friends, the one who had the greatest influence and the one who was the greatest kindness for him was Sangye Nyempa Drupdop. And because of his kindness, Mikyo Dorje became a great being with whose name and meaning were in accord. And so, not just for Karma Kamsan, but in general for the Dapo Kaiju, different than the philosophical. We need to raise our heads and proceed. And for us to be able to raise our heads and to go and proceed with other and go together with other Dharma lineages, and to be able to have philosophical tradition is really because of Mikyo Dorje's kindness. It's like thinking, if we were to drink water, think about the spring, the source that it came from. And so the fact that we have such an ability, enjoying such great fortune, whose kindness is it? How did it come from? That's something that we really have to know. We have a Tibetan saying, we shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be like crossing a bridge. When you think about it, when you get to the other side of this, once you cross the river, you don't destroy the bridge. It's not like that. And so now things are turning up. Okay, we think, I'm okay. We've got a bit of someone else, but it's okay. But it's not 100% like that. It's not like that. For the foundation for us to be able to turn out pretty well right now comes because of the previous great masters in the past in Tibet in the 1980s. There were no great philosophical texts by the Kagyu Tesud. And then at the 16th Karmapa sent the philosophical texts that he had printed in India, and he printed them, and they arrived in Tibet. And when they arrived, the many Khenpos who looked at them when they first saw them, they were delighted to see them. And And when they spoke with their Dharma friends from other Dharma traditions, they said, from the times those friends were destroyed. They said, we never had even a thought that you Karmakajis would have any philosophical texts. We couldn't have thought it was possible. So people said like that. For one person, no problem, because there were no texts. And without any texts, you can't pretend that there are. And so for that reason, and so I think that is enough for today. So tomorrow is a day off. The day after is a day off. Usually, when you say a day after the students, that's something the students should be happy about. Now look at the days off. The teacher himself is running. I'm thinking, oh, it's tomorrow. I have a day off. But actually, the day off. What? The day after too. In particular, the Dharma that I've teached it, I haven't been able to really get to the point. It's always getting a little bit feel like I'm finished. It's like I'm finishing just to happen. So what I'm teaching, I'm not saying anything short. I'm not saying the exact amount that I should. I'm starting from the slight ending of finish, but the actual thing is, when I prepare all of this, so what time is it now? I'm getting mixed up on the time. If we're beginning at 7, I'm still working on it at 6:57. I'm still getting ready to do things, and then I have to sit to teaching. And I think I should just start teaching, but I'm still working on something. So I think doing more just is not working. I haven't even had time to shave my head. You might be thinking, oh, he's always showing blood. He said he's going to teach 2, and he's not teaching 2 hours at all. So why is that? You might think that. So please be patient with us. Please be understanding. If you are too insistent, then what I think is we have a long bit of time. If I work too hard and I get sick in the middle, then it wouldn't be good for the. When I was teaching I worked too hard. And I didn't have time to sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a day. And the last day, it's like my head was spinning. I was about to fall down. So I think it's probably better not to, not better. So I get up. So I go to bed early, get up early, and do some preparation. Do some preparation. So please keep that in mind. So now we recite the closing prayers.